This tutorial we're going to cover how to enter a vendor's invoice and also how to pay your bills if you're not using QuickBooks. And to do that, you'll come under Accounts Payable, and this Accounts Payable menu will open up, and this will show you all the current invoices that are still open and are still due. And of course, this is our test database. You can see I don't keep up on Pay Inv Bills. And then down here is a list of the bills, like your gas and electric, telephone bills, anything like that you might want to enter. So that'll show you what's due down here. So to enter a new invoice, let's say you've created a purchase order and you received some merchandise on it. Of course, you want to first have their shipping receiving department or whoever does that go into the purchase order and receive the items that have come in. And now you want to enter a vendor invoice that they sent you for the material that's been shipped. So we'll click on Enter Pay Vendor Invoices. And you can see you have a list of tabs up here. The first three have to do with vendor invoices. And the other three, this middle one is an empty tab. But the other three deal with bills, like again, gas and electric, telephone, things like that. Anything else that you might want to pay. So let's say you want to enter a new vendor invoice. So the first thing you want to do is search for the vendor that you have the invoice for. Let's say it's Hager. Now, in order to demonstrate this, typically you would have POs that would come up if you had POs for that vendor. So I'm going to have to pull up an older one. It says no POs were found. That's because it's only looking the past 6 months. And you have three different options here. I can do for the past year, or I can select all. I'm going to go ahead and select all. And now I have the list of POs that they're in the system for Hager. I'll just go ahead and select the first one. Hopefully there's something on it. Here we go. So here's where we want to enter a vendor invoice. Now, you've got a couple options. First of all, you want to enter the vendor invoice number here. So let's say their invoice number is F125. And, of course, the date of the invoice, maybe it was a few days earlier. If there is a discount date, that will be critical, so you want to make sure you put the actual invoice date in there. And if they give you a discount date, you can enter that date here. So it generates the due date according to the terms you have set up for Hager, in this case 30 days net. If there was a discount date, you could enter that here. If they offered any, like if it was net, or what is it, 2%, 10 or something like that, then it would generate the discount date in 10 days and how much your discount percentage would be. So if you want to take advantage of the discount, you want to make sure you pay it before that discount date. Okay, so now we want to enter how many of these items are on the invoice. So if it's a partial invoice, maybe they only sent some of the items, you can go down here in the invoice quantity and enter the quantities of the items that were received. Maybe we got 4 of these and maybe only 25 of these, and everything else is back ordered. Now, for the invoice cost, this is the cost that was on the purchase order when it was written. So you want to make sure the invoice cost matches the purchase order cost. If it doesn't, then just enter, let's say this was $52.92 or whatever if it didn't match, go ahead and enter that new price here. But if it's the same, then just enter the same number. Hopefully they will match. And this one is 3.45. All right, so those are the 2 items that were received on this vendor invoice F125. So the next thing I want to do is click this button, Get Invoice Total. So you can see down here the invoice subtotal is empty. It does show me the full amount for the whole purchase order here. But since this is a partial invoice, I'm going to go ahead and click Get Invoice Totals, and it generates the total of this invoice, and that should match the invoice total that you have from the vendor. So once everything matches, you can go ahead and click Save Vendor Invoice. And it says the invoice has been saved. Now, one thing you can do too is if you want to make sure I think that was use that invoice. So you can see now that it just show that there's a balance of 0, and here is the balance of to be invoiced. You can look to see any saved invoices here. So if I want to pull up this F125, I can pull it up and it would show what the totals were on that. Or if for some reason you want to delete an invoice, pull it up and then click Delete Vendor Invoice, and it'll delete these items that were received from the system. And then you can re-enter it or whatever it is you want to do. Okay, so once you have the items received, let's say now it's time to pay the vendor invoice, you come back in here and you go under this tab, Pay Vendor Invoices. And again, we want to pull up Hager. And you can see right away it pulls up a couple of different invoices that are currently in the system that are still unpaid. And you can see we have open invoices here and also paid in full. So if we want to look at the paid invoices, we don't have any. It would pull up a list of any invoices that were paid. So we'll go back to open invoices. So now what you can do is you can pay multiple invoices or just pay one, however you want to do it. It's all up to you and how much you want to write your check for. So let's say we're going to go ahead and pay both of these. So I'll go ahead and check both of these boxes. And I'll come over here and I'm going to click Payment Type. It's typically check, so I'll just say check. But you do have some different options here if you're going to pay by credit card or however. Now, this does not do credit card payments through the system. That would be something you would set up with your vendor. But you could record it as a credit card payment if that's how you want to pay the bills. And here you put in the last 4 digits of the credit card that you're using. But typically you'll probably pay by check. You can see when we select check, we have some additional fields that opened up. So you can do a check memo. It has a limit of 30 characters, and that's that memo line on a check down the bottom, usually the bottom left. So you want to be careful how many characters you put in there. It'll default to your customer account number if you have an account number in the system for Hager. You can pull up selected vendor invoices here. Now this is where you would add a line item memo. And you would select whatever line item you want or whatever invoice. If you're paying multiple, then you'll select, let's say I want to add we need to check first. We'll go ahead and put a payment date of today. Now check number, you can the system will keep track of your check numbers. Now if you're using Portal Pro exclusively to write checks, then it'll automatically pull up the next check number. If not, then you'll have to manually enter your checks because you may have written other checks in the meantime, so you do not want to use this button. But let's say I'm using Portal Pro strictly to pay all bills and keep track of my check numbers. So I'll just click this button. It automatically gets the next check number. Okay, so next thing we want to do now is we're going to click on Calculate Payment. Oh yeah, I was adding a line item memo. And this is a memo that will show up in the lower portion of a check. If the top, it's usually a 3-tiered type check where the top portion is a check itself. And then the lower two portions are, you can have detailed memos of what the check is for. That's the only type of check that this will print out. So keep that in mind if you're using this. But I'll show you how you can verify that all the data will fit on your check. So if you want to add a line item memo for this invoice here, then you select that invoice and then type whatever your memo is and then click Add Memo, and it will add a memo to that line item, F2125. Otherwise, we'll just leave that blank. So at this point, now we want to do is we want to click the Calculate Payment. So we want to know how much our check is going to be for if we pay both of these invoices. And you see the total is $85.71 here and $298.01 here. So we'll click Calculate Payment. So that total there should equal the total of these two checked items. So once everything looks good, now we're going to go ahead and we can click on Save Payment. And the payment's now has been saved. And now I can print a check. And if I click Print Check, this is the form that will open up. You can see the check number is not here. So you would have to be using pre-printed checks, because it doesn't have the paid to or anything like that. This only fills in the amounts and dates and things like that on your check. So if you want to make sure this is all going to work, just come up here to this Print Report and then print out a copy of this. Now this will stay open. Then once that prints, take the copy and just kind of see if it lines up with the fields on your check. Make sure it's not like putting the date over the part where it says date or anything like that, or amount. So just make sure it all lines up. And as long as everything lines up, you're good to go. You can see, like I said, these are the sections down here typically where you have all the items that are being paid. So you want to make sure too that you're not paying so many that it overflows off of this. Just like any other check, you might have to write two separate checks. So once everything is lined up, then you put your checks in the printer and then click Print. Or if you have a dedicated printer for checks, just make sure you select your printer for your check and print it out. So once I've done that and I've clicked Print Check, it will mark that these items, I can now click Refresh Invoices, and it tells me there are no more open invoices left, which is what I wanted. And we'll go ahead and click Clear Payment Fields. So now I can go ahead and if there were more invoices here, I could still, if I want to pay more from Hager, I could continue on. Or I go ahead and go to my next vendor that I want to pay. Now this tab here is where if you need to search for a payment that you've already made. You can look up the payment type if it's a check, the reference number. You can search by maybe the check number, and you can make some adjustments here. But if you've already printed the check, you might not want to make any changes here. You might want to find another way to get around whatever issue you might be having. Now this over here, Enter Bills, is going to work pretty much the same way. Instead of vendor invoices, it's mainly for bills. And let's say we want to pay Duke Energy. So we pull up Duke Energy, make all the information in here, enter the invoice or bill number here, the date, product or service. In this case will be gas and electric. The expense account that it'll be using, and if there is a discount date, you can enter it here, and the due date. Enter the total, then save the bill, and you'll have a new bill saved for Duke. Now when you're ready to pay bills, you come under the Pay Bills and you pull up that whoever you want to pay the bill for. Not sure if there's anything in here. Sorry about that, my code popped up. So you can see why I have some existing bills in the system now that do need to be paid. Of course, like I said, this is a test system, so I don't pay bills. That's why they're in here so old. That was actually I think they would have shut my electric off by now. But this would be just the information about the bill, whether or not the check has been printed, and it works pretty much the same way. You select the how you're going to pay it. If you're paying by check, it works all exactly the same as we did under the Pay vendor invoices. So once you're done, that's you would save the payment and click print check, and of course that check will now show as being paid, and also print out a check for you. So that should pretty well cover it for entering vendor invoices and bills in Portal Pro if you're not using QuickBooks. This is a simple accounting program. It doesn't have the power of QuickBooks, but it'll certainly get the job done for you. If you have any questions on this, please give us a call and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Thanks.